Rauscher here. Welcome back to our series on the primitive ego journey from childhood conditioning to an enlightened and awakened and evolved adult consciousness. We're reviewing adult spiritual development. We're going to be doing chapter 12 today. This is a particularly interesting chapter because we're doing kind of a transition on this chapter. We've been looking at the importance of growth and self-awareness. Last week we looked at learning how to walk the middle path and what that means as a spiritual practice in our lives. And kind of focusing a lot on how growth in consciousness really improves success in our personal life and our relationships with other people. Today, however, what I want to do is I want to shift that focus slightly and include more of the world, okay? Not just personal relationships, but a global spirituality. So this chapter is the need for a new global spirituality. So the same principles that we've been talking about are now going to be at work, not just in a personal relationship, but in our relationship with everyone else on the planet. So here are 5 ideas, basic ideas on this chapter. There's a lot in this chapter, so I'll try to be pretty brief here, but I want to give you at least an idea of what's in there. Okay, first point, evolution. The old paradigm of evolution was based by Newton, and it was based kind of on the concept of competition, survival of the fittest. In other words, the battle between parts for dominance and to survive. Well, what we're understanding now about evolution, and we've come a long ways from Darwin, is that we're understanding that evolution is always focused on the whole, okay? And it's always based on compromise, interdependence, cooperation, and a concept that's called mutual benefit. And what this means is that in the evolution of a system, everything inside a particular holon or part of evolution, let's take the human body, every cell in the human body, for example, okay? Evolution says that we're going to look at the whole body, but every single cell in that holonic body, in other words, the whole body, is going to receive and benefit. In other words, it's going to receive benefit from the body, and it's going to give back to the body. Okay? It's a two-way street. So the old idea of survival of the fittest is giving away now to these ideas of compromise and interdependence. And this is really, really important when we start to look at the global issue. And that is that every single person on the planet is a cell in our global human culture. So every single cell, or person in this case, needs to contribute to the larger body and benefit from it. And obviously in our culture today, there are a lot of people who are not benefiting from their participation in the world. The primitive ego always wants light without darkness. In other words, our primitive ego doesn't want to walk through the valley of the shadow. We don't want to suffer. We don't want grief. We don't want anything negative. It's that pushing the river thing again. We don't want anything to come down the river that's going to be bad. We deny it. We push it away. Okay? Primitive ego, another way to say that metaphorically, is it always wants ups without downs. Okay? It wants mountains without valleys. And what we recognize is that that's not the way it works. So the primitive ego is always going to be very limited in how we deal with the rest of the world. Okay? It's always going to be focused on what's in it for me. Not anyone else, just me, okay? So what we want is to in this whole study of primitive ego is to begin to recognize that the primitive ego really is not defending its beliefs, okay, as much as it's defending its fragile self-identity and its self-esteem. That's where all the energy comes when either we get confronted and someone tells us we're wrong. We're not really defending our belief systems as much as we're defending our self-identity that we have used those beliefs to support, okay? So what we're really doing is we're defending our vulnerability, okay? And we use the imperative voice of absolute truth to insist that we're right. Now, everybody's going to think that what we're doing is we're protecting our beliefs, but that's really not true. What we're doing is we're protecting our self-esteem and our self-identity. And obviously, when the primitive ego defends its self-esteem and its self-identity, there can be a lot of energy, as you know, if you see two people, like last week when we were talking about the two people that were arguing, that the more right they are, the more conflict and violence and suffering they're going to create inside their relationship. Well, we do the same thing with the rest of the world, okay? So the only thing we're doing now is we're opening up these concepts to include everyone in the world, not just personal relationships again. All right, next point, open mind. That's what this whole journey is about, to awaken, become self-aware, and to recognize that if we're going to be successful in the world, then we have to walk the middle path, and we have to do it with an open mind. And an open mind, remember we talked about this, is emptiness of ego. It's not knowing for certain, okay? It's taking all certainty out of its belief systems and just recognizing that there are new ideas, there are new insights, there's new worldviews, and we're always looking for the truth on both sides of every issue. Remember primitive middle path thinking. Okay? What we're really searching for is to be scientifically literate versus a dependence on ideologies. In our world today, if we look at the world, there are ideologies all over the place. And ideologies are nothing more than black and white beliefs. And the people who have them defend them with a passionate amount of energy. And of course, what they're doing is protecting their self-identity and their self-esteem so that they can be right, okay? Again, it's not the belief so much, it's not even the ideology, it's protecting themselves, okay? So we want to be scientifically literate, okay? Stop and think about the people who knew that the world was flat so they wouldn't go out on a boat, okay? It took a fair amount of open-mindedness to begin to convince those people that the world really was round. It wasn't flat like they believed, okay? So what we're really doing with primitive ego psychology is learning how to open our minds so we can include all of the cultures and all the beliefs and all the religions and all the faiths of all the people on the planet. No one has a market on the truth, okay? Now, they may believe they do, but we need to understand that what they're really doing is protecting their self-identity. The moment we get insight into that and recognize with an open mind, we have to have the open mind ourselves, is that then we don't have to be quite so judgmental. These people, with their ideologies, we need to be a little more compassionate with them, to be a little more supportive and help them grow into a larger worldview. And that doesn't happen overnight. It does not happen quickly. And it won't happen unless you and I have learned to become self-aware and shut down our own belief systems, recognize our primitive ego, not get caught up with it, learn to walk that middle path, look for truths on both sides, so that we can become the force that really begins to unite people together in a global context. Does that make sense? Okay. So, open mind is an adult consciousness, okay? It's not defending beliefs, it's learning how to search for wisdom and truth so as to increase our ability to be compassionate, right? In effect, what we're doing is, if you remember from one of the previous chapters, what we're doing is we're identifying and letting go of becauses that would limit or make our unconditional love too conditional and judgmental, okay? If we're looking for wisdom and truth to increase compassion, then what we're really doing is we're embracing tolerance, an increased ability to embrace diversity, an increased ability to cooperate, to communicate with other people. My thing is getting a little low. And to embrace mutuality, the concept that everybody on this globe has the right to want what they need, and they have the same right to try to get that as we do, okay? We have to recognize that. Now we're back to mutual benefit again, right here. Very important concept if we're going to have a peaceful world. And then, of course, learning how to walk the middle path, drop our certainties and our absolute truths so that we are not creating violence in our relationships with the rest of the people on the planet. If we look at the whole idea right now, our political world, our cultures are in conflict. And what we need is a lot less ideology and a lot more compassion. Okay, that means that you and I need to learn how to tame our primitive ego, recognize it, and learn how to move into these other more adult ways of coming at the world. I'd like to leave you with one final thought, and that is, and I find this to be very, very useful, truth, beauty, and goodness are just recognized. If anybody has to pound the truth into your brain, okay, or if you're trying to pound it into someone else's brain, be careful. Truth is recognized. When you encounter truth, you know it. It's just like beauty. Nobody has to say, wow, that's a beautiful sunset. You know it's a beautiful sunset, right? Same thing with goodness. You know the difference between good and evil. You know when your energy is being helpful and supportive and compassionate, okay? And you also recognize, if you're paying attention, and that's what our job here is in terms of primitive ego, if we're paying attention, we know when we're being judgmental. We know when we're putting out negative energy. We know when we're bordering on being evil in terms of another person, okay? So again, all of those are basic qualities in the universe, and they are recognized by a consciousness that they do not have to be taught, okay? Beliefs have to be taught. These are basic categories. They're kind of like space, time, and gravity, okay? All right, so open mind is our goal. We're not defending beliefs. We're actually searching for wisdom and truths so that we can increase these positive benefits. Open mind is becoming more scientifically literate. When we recognize truth, accept it. Don't fight it just because it happens to conflict with one of our belief systems. Primitive ego wants to protect a self-identity. That's a really, really important concept. When other people get all cranked up and they're putting out all sorts of energy, they're not really defending their belief systems, okay? Bottom line, they're defending their self-identity, their self-esteem, and their sense of vulnerability. So if we take, for example, the terrorists in the world today in the Middle East, what are they fighting for? Their self-identity, their self-esteem, and their sense of vulnerability, okay? The moment we recognize that, we have the power to help them grow and evolve because we won't be pushing their buttons all the time, okay? Primitive ego always wants what's in it for us. We want light without darkness. We don't want to have to pay all these prices to have a peaceful global culture, but that's not the way it works. We're going to have to work for it. Evolution, the old model's competition, survival of the fittest. Today, it's more focused on the whole, which is the global, and it's based on compromise, interdependence, cooperation, and this is the big one. If you don't take anything else away from today's chapter review, take away this whole concept of mutual benefit. Every single part in this whole global system has to benefit from its participation in the human family. If they don't, then you're going to have a problem. Okay? All right. Hopefully that's helpful. There's a lot of material in this chapter. I think you'll find it pretty useful for you. But at any rate, we'll see you down the road at Chapter 13. We're getting near the end of our course here, and we'll be wrapping up in the next couple of sessions. So have a good week, stay awake, and we'll see you down the road.